Welcome to the Artie Lange Show. Very excited about our next guest, legend in professional wrestling and, in his own way, the comedy world. Please welcome to the Artie Lange Show the great Jerry Lawler. What's up, Jerry?
Hey, Artie. How are you, my friend?
How you doing, man?
I'm doing really good. I'm trying to figure out how I'm a legend in the world of comedy. But
Andy Kaufman. Let me play it. Let me play it for you. Here's a clip from the David Letterman show about 30 years ago or more.
Oh, okay.
Jerry Lawler and Andy Kaufman. Let's hear it.
Is Andy, are you coming in here again, or?
I am sick of this. You are full of my friend. I will sue you for everything you have. I will sue you. You're a as far as I'm concerned. You hear me? I will get you for this.
Okay, let me explain what just happened there. That was Jerry Lawler in the early 80s went on the David Letterman show with Andy Kaufman. Andy Kaufman, one of his bits he would do, he would go around the country and he would wrestle women. And Jerry Lawler called out Andy Kaufman on the Letterman show and bitch slapped Andy Kaufman, basically. And Kaufman fell over the desk, and Kaufman came back out and unleashed a verbal tirade on Jerry Lawler. And, of course, it was all, all a joke, all staged. All staged.
Was it?
A real slap from what I saw. Now explain how that all happened. How did he approach you, and how much of it was staged, and how real was the slap and everything like that?
Well, the appearance on David Letterman show followed a few months previous to that. Andy and I had a match. You know, as you said, Andy Kaufman was, he was the big star of the TV show Taxi, and at the time in '83, it was like the top-rated. One of the top-rated shows on network television.
Yeah, and he had also done some work on Saturday Night Live, which made him very famous. He had an album out. He was a famous guy in the world of comedy.
Exactly, and the funny thing that I found out later was Andy, as a kid growing up, was a huge wrestling fan.
Right,
and he was influenced by one particular wrestler. Where his favorite villain was this guy by the name of Nature Boy Buddy Rogers. And Andy told me later, he said, I was fascinated by the fact that a guy could go on television and intentionally try to make people hate him, but still be popular.
Right.
And he said, later on, he really tried, if you look back on Andy's career, that was what he tried to do his entire career. He told me, he said, I'm not a comedian. I've never told a joke in my life. He said, I'm a performance artist. And he said, I just like to get a reaction out of my audience. And he said, I really enjoy getting a negative reaction more so than a positive one.
Yeah.
If you remember, sometimes Andy would go out on stage when people came to see him do stand-up comedy, and if anybody called out for a latke to say thank you very much, he would pull out the book, The Great Gatsby, pull out a podium, and just start reading until everybody in the audience had gotten up and left.
Yeah, he was a provocateur, an antagonist. He liked to do that, and he was famous for a lot of things. And, he also took risks. Not all of that stuff worked. A lot of times it would fail miserably. But he stayed committed to it. And that is one of the great things about wrestling. I always think wrestling is really popular for the same reason a show like The Simpsons is. Because really smart people and really stupid people love it for completely different reasons. And if you get both of those, markets, you're on top. Smart people appreciate the irony and what you guys do and the provocativism of it, and the stupid people go, hey, he's slapping that guy, so you win on it, and I have a lot of respect for what you guys do. And
well, it is a very tough profession. We got some fantastic superstars that go out there and literally, and I mean this literally, risk life and limb every night. These crazy moves that they do. It's just like, they are really death-defying. But at the same time, they realize that they're performers. They're putting on a performance. They're entertainers. They go out there, and when you go to, a WWE event, you're seeing every form of entertainment out there. It's like with the entrances, it's like going to a rock concert. It's, you see the athleticism of any type of sporting event. You see the soap opera. You see pyrotechnics. It's everything all rolled into one, and it's literally. Forget the circus. I think we're the greatest show on earth.
It is, and I in a lot of ways, it's very entertaining, and it's run very well. Now, I'm sorry, I cut you off. So how does Andy Kaufman approach you, and how does all this happen?
Well, as you said before, Andy started. He was doing all of this, the television, the taxi show, and stand-up comedy routines, and then he started incorporating, just for his own gratification, one of the things that he would do where he didn't really care how anybody reacted to it. He just did things to make himself happy, and one of the things he started doing was wrestling.
Right.
He wanted to do a wrestling bit in his comedy routines, and of course he didn't feel like he was physically endowed enough to wrestle a man. So he started wrestling women, and he crowned himself the intergender wrestling champion.
Right.
And he would go into these comedy clubs or different places and challenge women out of the audience and have them come up and get in the ring with him or get on stage with him. And Andy would have his close friend Bob Zamuda in a referee shirt, and Andy would literally roll around and actually wrestle these girls. None of it was staged. He would just literally manhandled and all that sort of stuff. And then finally, one time, Andy went to, apparently he approached Vince McMahon Sr. Vince McMahon, everybody's familiar with.
Right.
His father originally
Right.
was the promoter in New York. And Andy was from Long Island. And he went to a show there in Long Island, and he approached Vince McMahon Sr., and he explained to him what he was doing. And he said, it's really not going over that well because people came to see me do comedy or whatever. He said, I was wondering if it would be possible for me to wrestle some women on one of your events, where the crowd actually came to see wrestling.
Right.
And like I said, in the early 80s, Vince McMahon Sr.'s answer to Andy was, he said, Andy, he said, our fans are skeptical anyway, and I'm just hesitant to involve like a Hollywood actor with our shows. He said, I just feel like, then the fans might think we're all a bunch of actors and this is all just a show we're putting on. So he kind of gave Andy the brush off. And fortunately for me, a guy by the name of Bill Apter, who was the Pro Wrestling Illustrated photographer for the national magazines there, he overheard the conversation, and he knew Andy. And he told Andy about our promotion that we had down in Memphis, Tennessee. And at the time, there were different wrestling promotions all over the country, but the only one Andy knew about was the one in New York. So this guy told Andy, he said, hey, my friend Jerry Lawler runs a promotion down in Memphis, and he said, I think he would be interested in doing this. So he gave Andy my number, and one day out of the blue, I get a call from Andy Kaufman, and I was like, oh, my gosh. And he's saying, hey, what I would like to do, same thing he told Vince, is come to your promotion and wrestle women out of the audience. And I thought it was a great idea.
Right.
Hey, how many times are you going to get a Hollywood TV star to come down to Memphis and help you with your promotion? So we brought Andy down. He was fantastic. He went on television. He insulted women. He insulted the South. He had everybody in Memphis wanted to lynch this guy.
Right, he did that great bit where he would say, I'm a smart Hollywood star. You people are stupid. Yeah. He was actually like what Bill Maher really is.
Yeah. Because Andy was just playing a part.
Exactly. Bill Maher really is. He's a real Andy Kaufman character. Yeah.
Exactly. So anyway, we had Andy come out. He went in and he challenged women out of the audience. We had sellout after sellout. We were wrestling in the 11,000-seat Mid-South Coliseum every single Monday night, a live event. We brought Andy in for about 4 weeks in a row, sold out. He literally wrestled women out of the audience, and there was nothing set up about it. I mean, he even out of his own pocket, he would offer these women a $5,000 prize if anybody could beat him. None of them ever did.
Man.
So finally, I'm just, in my own mind, I'm thinking, man, there's got to be some kind of way I can get the rub off of this big star. I'll be honest with you, that's just how it came about. And I told Andy, I said, Andy, we've done this for about a month in a row now, and I said, it's time to move on to something else. I said, you need to have a match with a man. These people here, they would go crazy to see you have a match with a guy. He said, oh, no, I can't do that. And I said, well, look, if I had a match with you, Andy, I could promise you won't get hurt, and it could be great. And so, then finally I controlled him, and he finally agreed, and that's how our match came about in Memphis. And if you remember, the match didn't last very long. I wound up picking Andy up and giving him a pile driver.
Right.
The move where you stick your opponent's head between your legs and turn him upside down and then drop him down on his head. And so Andy winds up going to the hospital. After the match, I'm expecting him to get up. I told the referee, go over and, tell him to let him help him back to the dressing room. And the referee comes back to me while Andy's laying there like he's dead. He comes back to me in the ring and says, he wants an ambulance.
Oh.
And I said, for what? He said, I said, no. I said, the ambulance costs like $400, and where are they going to take it anyway? I sent the referee back over and said, no ambulance. Get up, we'll help you back to the back. And so the referee goes over, and Andy's still laying there like he's dead. And the referee comes back to me, and he says he'll pay for the ambulance, but he wants an ambulance.
Wow.
Yeah, that's the way it went down.
So was he really hurt, or was it a show, that part of it?
I don't know. He told me later that it hurt his neck and his head. But
So
anyway, he wound up going to a Memphis hospital. They did X-rays on him, so he had he said minor injuries, but it was like a compressed vertebrae, and he wound up staying in the Memphis hospital for 3 days in traction.
Oh man.
Yeah. So and then of course after that, if you remember, he wore this neck brace
Right.
For months. I mean, everywhere he went, he wore the neck brace. They even had to threaten to write him out of the TV show Taxi if he didn't take off the neck brace.
So then, how does the Letterman appearance happen? So
Just one day. I mean, I didn't hear any more from him. And then, like I said, for about 3 or 4 months, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, I get a phone call, and it's Andy, and he says, "Hey, would you want to be on the David Letterman show?" And if you this was 1983, and this was the first year of Late Night with David Letterman.
Right.
And so, anyway, I said, "Well, sure." Even though at that time it was like I said, it was his first year in a show. It wasn't a big deal that it is now, I guess. But anyway, I said, "Sure, I'd like to be on there." So he said, "Well, I'll call you back with the date." And then a few days later, they said he calls me back, and then the Letterman people call me, and they flew me to New York. And I mean, really, not having no clue what we were going to do. And so I go into Rockefeller Center there on the morning of the show, and I met with a segment producer. You never get to see Dave before the show. I met with the segment producer, and Andy wouldn't agree to meet. Andy wouldn't agree to be around me at all. I mean,
Right.
telling these people, I can't stand to be around this guy. I'm afraid of him and everything. So
Oh, man.
I met with the segment producer, and the guy says, "All right, here's what we'd like you to do. Here's what we got figured out for the show. In the first segment, you guys are going to be on for 2 segments. In the first segment, Dave will introduce you and Andy, and then we'd like for you guys to be a little bit antagonistic towards each other. Dave's going to show the clip of you giving Andy the pile drivers, and then be a little bit antagonistic, not too much." And he said, "Then Dave will take a break, and then we'll come back in the second segment, and Andy will apologize to you for making fun of wrestling. You apologize to Andy for dropping him on his head, and Andy will then sing what the world needs now is love, sweet love." And so that was what was told to me, and I said, "Okay, cool." And and I went back to my hotel, and then of course the taping was going to be at I think 5:30 or something in the afternoon. So around noon, I get a call from Andy.
Right.
And he said, "Did they tell you what they wanted to do?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well, what do you think?" And I said, "Well, it's it's their show." I said, "But that's going to be the end of our feud if we both apologize to each other." And he said, "Yeah, that's what I was thinking too." And he said, "Wonder what would happen if you just hauled off and slugged me." I mean, that was the way he said it. And I said, "Oh, Andy," I said, "first of all, I mean, since we're taping it, they won't show it." And I said, "Second of all, I'll probably get arrested." And I said, I can't risk that." And he said, "Yeah, you're right, but man, that would be great, wouldn't it?"
Yeah.
So anyway, that's the way it was left. I didn't talk to Andy anymore. I didn't see him until we met as we were walking out on the stage of the show.
Wow.
And so all of that, I swear to God, when I go back and watch it now on television, it's like an out-of-body experience. It's like I'm watching somebody else or something that didn't. I mean, it was like, I can't even remember or believe what I'm seeing because it just unfolded. It just happened. We went through the first segment. We were a little bit antagonistic. Dave had a wrestling bell hidden under his table. Then he rang the bell. And he said, "Hey, we're going to take a break, maybe get a hose out and cool these guys off a little bit." So then we came back in the second segment, and Andy just continued on with the antagonizing. He never apologized. So, I knew that then I could just feel it. I mean, it was just something that just happened between us. And when he didn't apologize to me, I didn't apologize to him. And I think and when I watch it back, I watched Dave's reaction to the whole thing because, I'm sure at that point Dave said, "Uh-oh, this is not going the way it's supposed to go." So finally, he said, "Well, you know what, guys, we're going to take another break here." And I knew at that point when he said that, I said, "This is it for us. We're going to be off after this." And then when Paul Schaefer started playing the music, I don't know. I don't even know what I was thinking. When I watch it back now, like I said, it's like watching somebody else do it. I just stood up. I looked Andy right in the eyes, and I just slapped the face out of him.
So that's a real. I mean, obviously that's a real slap.
Oh, it was absolutely. I couldn't slap anybody any harder.
Oh man! and so when Letterman had no idea.
Letterman had absolutely no idea. Andy had no idea. I didn't have any idea.
Well, Andy suggested it to you, though. I mean,
suggested, and that's what was going through my mind.
Right.
But I mean, we still didn't know for sure that was what was going to happen. But Dave, of course, had no clue.
So what was Andy? So when you go to commercial, what was Andy like? Was he mad at you or happy?
Oh, when I slapped him. And then he fell completely out of his chair over backwards and everything. Then the security guard came and got me. As we went to break, the security guard came and got me and kind of hustled me back into the green room. And I could just, it was so funny because when I went out of the green room to go be on the show, there were about 10 other guests just hanging out in the green room.
Yeah.
Well, when they brought me back in there, it completely cleared out. It was so they set me in the green room, and I could hear this big commotion going on outside. And I could hear Andy just ranting and raving. And I mean, it was like, I could hear like women just, it was like somebody had been assassinated or something. I was just thinking, oh my God, this is awful. I'm going to go to jail and all this sort of stuff. And then it kind of quieted down. And literally, when you do the Letterman show, you know, the commercial breaks are like 2 minutes long.
Right.
And that's the way it is when you're taping the show. They stop for tape for 2 minutes, and they turn all the lights down real low, and then boom, 2 minutes later, they say, okay, 3, 2, 1, boom, you're back on, right?
Right.
Well, anyway, about 15 minutes went by while I sat back there in the green room, and I guess they're trying to figure what they should do and rewrite the show or whatever. But anyway, finally an intern sticks his head in the door like he's going to get his head knocked off or something. Just barely sticks his head in and says, Mr. Lawler, Mr. Letterman wants to know if you'd like to come back out and sort of wrap things up. and I thought, well, gosh, after that, I mean, if they're going to do this, they're going to show this, right? And so I said, sure, I'll be glad to. So I go back out around, and then it turned into like a wrestling crowd. As I walk back out on stage, this whole audience of about 650 people start booing me like in a wrestling match.
That's great. That's great.
So I go over and I sit down, and Andy is still way over by the door where you know, you see sometimes off camera.
Yeah.
The door over there. Andy's back over there, and he's holding the side of his head. And I think his brother was there with him and his girlfriend, and they're all gathered around Andy. And so they start to come, you know, they start to count like 10, 9, and Dave says, Andy, are you going to come back out here or not? So Andy says, no. If I come out there, I'll say words you can't say on television.
Yeah.
And so it was like 3, 2, 1, and so then we're back. And Dave says, well, I'm here, Jerry Lawler's here, Andy Kaufman, and some nights I wish Tom Snyder were still here. So then about that time, he said, well, Jerry, I'd like to thank you for being here. And suddenly, here comes Andy.
Yeah.
And he comes in over Dave's shoulder, and it was like this. He just unleashed this, as you call it, verbal tirade of obscenity. Just the worst. And one thing you had to know about Andy, Andy was like a very, and this I think is really what sold Dave on the whole deal, was Andy was very mild-mannered and quiet, and you know, he didn't drink or smoke, or he meditated, he did yoga and all that
Right.
stuff, and he never would swear. He would never curse, right?
Yeah.
And so all of a sudden, here's Andy comes in there, and he's pounding on Dave's desk, and he says, you MFer, you CS, I'm going to sue your effing ass. You know, he just went off like a wild man. And I'm sitting there thinking, what the hell?
You don't know what to do. You don't know.
Now I'm thinking, Andy, they're obviously going to show what happened,
Right.
but they sure aren't going to show this. You're killing the whole deal, right?
Right.
And so I'm trying with my body language just to I lean back in the chair like to show my disgust, to try to say, Andy, what the hell are you doing? And so then he grabs Dave's like coffee and starts to throw it at me, and I jump out of the way of that, and then he runs towards him, and he runs off again, and they go to break again, and the security guard comes and grabs me, and he takes me straight to the elevator this time, and he says, look, I'm thinking he's maybe going to take me to jail, and he gets me on the elevator, and he said, man, I just want you to get you out of the studios. He said, because that Kaufman's elevator don't go all the way to the top. He said, he'll probably have you arrested or something. And so I went downstairs. I went back to the hotel. Didn't hear another word until 11:30 that night. Turned on the television, and there it was. They showed the whole thing. They even showed Andy's cursing tirade. And the funniest thing was, like, as you played it a while ago, instead of beeping it out, they put in these little sound effects going cuckoo, cuckoo.
Right.
And it made it hilarious.
Right.
You know? And it was just, You know, the next morning, I mean, as soon as the show went off, my phone started ringing. It's the New York Times, it's the New York Post, it's the Daily News, it's every media. They went crazy with it. It was the pictures of it on the front page of the.
Well, I remember it was big.
The next morning, and it was insane.
Remember, my father came in and told me about it. He goes, you have to understand what just happened. He told me the whole thing, blah, blah, blah. And back then, you couldn't see anything again on YouTube. If you didn't see it, you had to wait till eventually you saw a clip of it. So when's the next time you talked to Kaufman after that, and how did he react?
Oh, the next time I actually saw Andy was he came back down to Memphis, and a lot of people thought that we only had had the one match, but then Andy, man, I mean, he told me later, he said, I'd give up everything I'm doing in Hollywood, the taxi, the TV shows, the comedy clubs, if I could just stay involved in wrestling. He said, I love it. And so anyway, he came back and we worked out a bunch of matches where then Andy put like a bounty on my head, and he brought in Jesse the Body Ventura, all of these big superstar wrestlers. Andy brought them in and he would be in their corner while I wrestled these guys, and I'm trying to get my hands on Andy, he's trying to get to me, and so we went on for like a year after this until literally Andy was on my show. I had a Saturday morning talk show as well, and Andy was on my show one morning and started coughing during this interview, and then afterwards he said, "Man, I'm sorry about coughing during that interview." He said, "But I just got diagnosed this week with lung cancer."
Wow! So you guys cashed in on it, had your fun, and became friends.
We finally did become friends. Yeah.
Oh wow! And so was it hard for you when he passed then, because you were friendly with the guy?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, and he was just such a I don't know. I mean, just such a humble and respectful guy. Once you got to know him, I mean, literally, Andy and I were the same age, and he never once, out of in the year time that I knew him, he never referred to me as anything other than Mr. Lawler.
Well, no kidding.
Jerry, it was always Mr. Lawler. He was just that kind of guy,
Well, I never knew that story in that much detail, Jerry. You tell it great. I appreciate you. Tell him I never knew the details.
What's funny, Andy was like a cult hero to
sure.
a lot of the comedians that came after him. I had just a couple of years ago, I'm sitting here at home in Memphis, and I get a call from George Shapiro, who was Andy's manager,
and Jerry Seinfeld's manager.
Well, and exactly, and George Shapiro said, and George came to Memphis for the match. He was there with Andy when Andy.
Right, he was involved with all that, yeah.
Exactly, and so George called me a couple of years ago, and he says, "Hey, I got one of my clients is going to come to Memphis. He's playing the Orpheum Theater, and he was wondering if you could meet him backstage and just tell him how about you and Andy Kaufman. Just tell him basically the story that I just told you." And I said, "Sure, George. Who is it?" And he says, "Jerry Seinfeld."
Yeah, Seinfeld. Shapiro became Seinfeld's man. And we got all that Seinfeld syndication money, I know. And then, of course, you're in Man on the Moon. You're in the movie about him.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, you know what, Jerry? Can you stick around for a commercial break?
Yeah, oh yeah, I'm sorry, I'm a little long.
No, don't worry about it. I just want you to smack me in the face when we come back. No, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, I know you got a couple of things to plug, and we'll talk about that. So, quick commercial, back with the great Jerry Lawler right after these words.